Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast here at J Moore Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your questions into the comment box and I will check from time to time. Baltimore County's tastiest week is here. Enjoy delicious meals and deals with Baltimore County Summer Restaurant Week that is continuing through August 6th. Visit BaltimoreCountyRestaurantWeek.com to learn more. This week's guest is Chef Chris Spear, a personal chef in the DMV, Perfect Little Bites, founder and interviewer of the successful podcast Chefs Without Restaurants, focused on food and beverage entrepreneurs like caterers, research chefs, personal chefs, cookbook authors, food truck operators, farmers, and more. He has written for starchefs.com and Plate Magazine, and some of his recipes can be found on the Garden and Gun and Imbibe website. Let's welcome Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's good to reconnect with you. We were sort of talking before going on air, and Chris and I, our paths have crossed many times at Star Chefs and Koshan 555. So we're not strangers, that's for sure.
I was thinking, I think it's probably before I even had kids and my kids just turned 11. It feels like I've known you forever now.
Well, what can I say? I've been around.
Me too.
That's what it says on the bathroom walls. I'm sorry, I can't resist a chance to laugh. So, other than joining us today, Chris, what else is on your plate for the day?
Oh, on my plate for the day, I'm getting ready for 2 events this weekend. So, I work as a personal chef. Weekends are my bread and butter. So, kind of planning out what I have a party for 8 on Friday and then a party for 8 on Sunday. So, just getting my, ducks in a row for that, as they say.
That's terrific. We were talking you gave me a little bit of information before we went on air that I didn't know about, because this is J Moore Contemporary Jewish Living. You said that you worked in a couple kosher kitchens.
I did.
How was that experience?
It was great. I had 2 Jewish roommates in college. Neither of them kept kosher, but I had a little background, and I always talked to them about it. My culinary career has taken me all over the country, and I moved to Seattle shortly after graduating college, and I went to a retirement community. And anyone who knows a little bit about me knows that I've kind of worked a lot in retirement communities. And I went to a place, and it was called the Summit at First Hill, which is kind of nondescript. And I went through and did the whole interview with the chef, or the GM rather. And then when we were done, he said, well, just one thing. This is actually a Jewish retirement community, and it's a kosher kitchen. Have you ever done any of that? And I said, no, but how hard could it be? And I soon figured it out. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I moved cross country, had a couple jobs. And then there was an opening for one out in Pennsylvania where I was living. And I went and did that too. So that was really interesting. One of the great things for me is when I was in Seattle, I was a vegetarian. I'm not anymore. I'm recovering. But the nice thing about working in a kosher kitchen is knowing when you're eating out of the parv or the dairy kitchens that everything is going to be, meat free. And then when you're in the meat kitchen, there's so many things that were able to be eaten. So I was able to personally grow my own vegetarian cooking from working there. Just one of the very cool things working in those kitchens.
Well, let me go back. All right. You're a graduate of Johnson and Wales. Did you go to North Carolina? Did you do Rhode Island?
Rhode Island. Yeah. I grew up in Massachusetts in a city called Marlborough. So I was 40 miles west of Boston, but I was about an hour from Providence. So that was a natural fit for me. And, I entered culinary school in 94. So if you think of the time, Food Network was just starting. I loved Cajun cuisine for whatever reason. I don't know that I'd ever even actually eaten it, but Emeril was on the Food Network, right? And Emeril was from Massachusetts. Emeril went to Johnson and Wales. That seemed really cool. But for me, that's where I wanted to go. It's the only school I applied to. I didn't even apply to CIA or anywhere else. I just said, I'm applying to Johnson and Wales. If I don't get in, I'll figure it out. So I went to Johnson and Wales Providence and did the 4-year bachelor's in culinary arts there.
So I always ask, or routinely ask, if my mouth works, Who in your family inspired you to become the food person that you are? Was it Bubby? Was it your grandmother? Was it your mother? Was mother a bad cook? Tell me about your upbringing in food.
Yeah, it was more my mom. My grandmother didn't really cook much, but my great grandmother did. My great grandmother was a home ec teacher in her younger days and a phenomenal cook. She lived about 2.5 hours away from us on Cape Cod. And every time we went, for holidays, Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, my favorite thing was donuts. She always made fresh donuts, fried donuts, if she knew we were coming. But my mom cooked all the time and it wasn't fancy. I'm fortunate that my mom stayed home with me until I was in 6th grade, which meant, and we're talking about the 80s where a lot of households were 2 income households. A lot of kids grew up, latchkey kids didn't have parents at home, but my mom was home with me until I was 11. And I got to see her cooking every day. It wasn't fancy, but my dad worked for Sears in retail and worked 3 nights a week. So 3 nights of the week, it was just me and my mom. So we really got to do some, adventurous stuff. Like I think about the first time we had tacos. Nobody was eating tacos in 1987, and my dad wasn't so adventurous. So that would be one of those things my mom and I would do. But I grew up around that. And she took me grocery shopping with her. She told me or taught me how to price check, when you look at how much per ounce or pound it is and figure all that stuff out. And then when I was 12, my mom slipped a disc in her back and was bedbound for about 3 months. And I took over all the cooking in my household. Again, my dad was out of the house 3 or 4 nights a week. He was not a good cook. He was one of those breakfast for dinner kind of guys.
Right.
So I would sit in bed with my mom and we would make a grocery list and he would take me shopping and I would bring the food home and I was cooking most of the meals for the family. I'm an only child, so it was just the 3 of us, but I was doing most of the meals for 3 months there. But yeah, we had a real meal on the table every night in the 80s when, a lot of people were doing takeout, fast food, frozen dinners. And I feel really fortunate about that. But again, it wasn't necessarily fancy.
No, but it was the basics. My mother was a good basic cook. On a rare occasion, if lobster was on sale, she'd do a stuffed lobster or a veal scallopini, and that could be maybe once a year otherwise. But she was into doing Friday night dinners. We didn't keep kosher, but everybody loved coming because she was a great cook of the basic items. How did you end up in Frederick? Now, I know you went to work for Sodexo, food
Yeah.
service, senior living places, and I think, where was it? What did I see that I thought was funny that you did? I'm scaling my notes. There's a million of them here because there's so much.
Well,
No,
I ended up in Frederick because my wife's from Virginia. She grew up in Winchester, Virginia. So my wife is a dietitian now, but we met at culinary school. I had actually graduated and was still living in the area. So she's a couple of years behind me, but she went to Johnson Wales for culinary. And that's how we met, just kind of randomly in Rhode Island. And together we moved across the country. She had family in Seattle and wanted to move out there. So we did. Then she wanted to become a dietitian and there were no programs out there. So there was one in Westchester, Pennsylvania at Westchester U. So we moved there so she could finish her degree or get her degree. And when she was done, we were like, why are we living here? My family's in Massachusetts. Hers was in Virginia. We wanted to be close to some family. She didn't really want to deal with the winters of New England. I didn't either. So we wanted to be close to her family in Winchester, and we were just looking on the map, and Frederick was about an hour. We didn't want to move to Winchester. We both like bigger cities, and we found it, and we're like, oh, this is great. We're an hour from both DC and Baltimore. Of course, depending on traffic, because it's more like 2.5 hours from DC on a work day. But yeah, we just found it on a map. So we went down to Frederick from Westchester, Pennsylvania, and spent the weekend. Went out to eat a couple places, and the hospital here in Frederick actually offered my wife a job and paid for our relocation. So we, went for it. And being a chef, it's easy to find a job anywhere. So we moved down here. She had the job, and then I found one shortly thereafter.
Right. Let's see. What was the first dish you learned to make that you were still proud of and continue to make today?
Well, I would say talking about a family dish, being from New England, we have New England baked beans. I talk about that quite frequently because that's one of those things that I think our recipe goes back 5 generations or so. Again, my mom got it from my great grandmother. It skipped a generation. My grandmother wasn't really interested in it, so my mom took that on and passed that along to me, and that's something that I still do. And it was really interesting because my great grandmother had it as a pinch of this, cover the beans with water, cook until done. Salt pork is going to be, half to a third of a pound. Well, what does all that really mean? But my mom was very meticulous and wanted all of that measured out. So I made sure that I got from her exactly, okay, well, I like yours, mom. How much water is that? How long are you cooking it? So I would say not necessarily the first dish I made, but pretty close to one of the first, like, kind of authentic or family traditional dishes were my New England baked bean recipe.
Right. We were talking about Sodexo. Very hard move when you're at Sodexo, you're a family man, you have the twins, to walk away from those benefits and all that they offer and start your own business. So tell me a little bit about the process of going and starting Perfect Little Bites, your personal chef hash specialty dinner in somebody's home business.
Yeah, very tough. So, it was something that I had thought about previously before I even moved here. I had kind of tinkered with in Pennsylvania. And if you're interested, we can talk about that. But yeah, I started working for Sodexo and it was a great job as far as being a chef. I talk about contract food service and many of the benefits, some of which are you're probably getting paid better than working in a restaurant. The benefits are without a doubt great. I was working one weekend a month. Then it went down. I had to work every other weekend shortly thereafter, but it was a good work-life balance. But I just wasn't necessarily fulfilled. Like I still wanted to be creating my food. I was making a lot of food there that I was really proud of, had a great team, but I just wanted to do something different. And I had tinkered with this when I was in Pennsylvania. I'd done it a couple times through a catering company I was with. And I just wanted to do it. So I actually joined the Personal Chef Association probably within 2 years of working at Sodexo, and took the course on how to do it like the right way legally and started playing around with it. And I was ready to go. And then we found out my wife was pregnant with twins. So we pumped the brakes a little bit because she was going to take a extended leave from work. We weren't going to have health insurance and all that stuff that's really important, right? So I said, okay, well, that's fine. It just gives me a little more time to figure it out. So the benefit of working where I was I had every other weekend off. So I could still work my job and start by doing a dinner, once a month, twice a month, try it out and build up a clientele. So I spent almost 6 years or so kind of doing it on the side, which I don't regret at all. I mean, if you can go faster, go faster. But for me, it was great because it was like, what is my market fit? How do I acquire customers? Like, what's my pricing look like? You can go out and do a dinner and not charge necessarily what you need to charge just to build some clientele. You can find where your weak points are. So I did it a lot longer on the side than I probably would have liked to. But in hindsight, it worked out so that when I was really ready to go, I felt like I could hit the ground running.
So let's talk about Perfect Little Bites. It's full time along with the podcast, and everybody can see the equipment you use to record your podcast as opposed to my little thing here. Let's talk about your DMV. So you do specialty foods for customers in the Baltimore, Maryland, DC area, parts of West Virginia, like around Harper's Ferry, I take it's closer, etc. Um, what Tell us a little bit more about the business. Okay, yeah, you can do a Valentine's dinner for two, but does it make sense? Tell us more about what you can do and what you offer.
Yeah, what I wanted to do was give you a restaurant experience in your home. When I joined the Personal Chef Association, at the time, a lot of it was really geared towards meal prep, and I didn't want to do meal prep. That seems kind of tedious and boring to me. I don't want to be making just like these, cook a chicken breast, have some quinoa, broccoli, whatever, leave it for people in their fridge. I just wanted to be a replacement for going out, almost like, you wouldn't use the term micro catering when I started, but that's what I wanted it to be, especially as I had children. My wife and I love food, but it was so hard going out with the kids. And then it's so expensive to have childcare. So what if I could come into your house, bring the china, bring the silverware, linen napkins, set the table. You could have your child in the other room. You could leave between courses and nurse if you had to. And just have a dinner party and have it be customized and personalized. I think today everyone knows people who have dietary restrictions, whether it's gluten-free or they're vegan or some allergies. It's challenging to have those accommodated when you go out to restaurants, especially some of the fine dining places. And I just saw a market fit where I could come in and do that. And I really started doing, 2 people. I tell people, this is a great business if you want to start it on the side. Just find out about your neighbors and family members. Whose birthday is it? Whose anniversary? And just go cook a dinner for 2 for them. So I really wanted to focus on small, like 2 to kind of 20 people at max. I didn't want it to be a big catering where I have to cram a bunch of stuff into a chafing dish and I'm just like, slinging food onto plates as fast as I could. I really wanted to make it feel like you were having a fine dining dinner, but in the comfort of your home instead of going out to a restaurant.
What is dinner with friends?
For me, like, what does dinner with friends look like?
Well, I think I saw something that on one of your pages, you called it dinner with friends. So.
Sure. So I do a somewhat infrequent collaborative pop-up, and that falls under the Chefs Without Restaurants kind of moniker there. One of the ideas is I just wanted to cook with people that I enjoyed spending time with and learning from. So it gets really challenging to kind of do pop-ups and collabs, and I don't do them as much as I had hoped, but a lot of that was because of COVID. Like, I was just getting that started in the fall of 2019 and had a few of them under my belt. And then the idea of, working with numerous people and bringing strangers together didn't really fit, but it's always been kind of a core of what Chefs Without Restaurants was about. And what I personally wanted to do is just, who are the people that I love personally who have a great, culinary sensibility, and can we just get together and have people come together for dinner, and quite often strangers, so that's been renting Airbnbs. That's been booking out hotels. There was a DC hotel that gave us their rooftop bar restaurant area to use for one. I recently drove up to New Jersey to cook with my friend Matt Collins, and we did a dinner together. So I've had about a half a dozen of them done, and that's something that I want to focus on more going forward.
Right. And I want to tell people all his information floats up in the comment section, but it's very simple. Perfect little bites for his dinners in your home. And that is Facebook, that is Instagram, that is, what else am I missing?
We're everywhere. I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube, I'm on all of the social media channels. Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it now. If you put in Perfect Little Bites, you're going to find me.
Okay. And then let's move over to Chefs Without Restaurants, which, if you know how to spell Chefs Without Restaurants, plenty of social media. The Facebook page, I believe you have to be approved to be on.
So that's to be in the group, because I wanted to have a group that's beneficial to small business owners and not just have it a spam page. So I have a public page that's just like any public Facebook page where I'm sharing recipes, content on there. But then I wanted to have a group that is really focused on people who are either already a small food business owner or looking to start one, where we could kind of just share best practices and resources, et cetera.
And that begot the podcast, which...
Yep.
November 19th was the first podcast.
November 2019, yeah.
Okay. So I, being curious, went back to that first episode.
Oh, no good.
And you re-recorded and edited it.
I had to, when your first episode is quite often where people start, and on Spotify, that's your trailer episode, right? So when someone goes for a podcast, I've grown so much. So I just released episode 200. I've been doing this almost 4 years now. I want people to listen to it today. If they go back and listen to the first episode, The audio quality is not going to be the same. It was just the initial kind of intro about what the show is about that I re-recorded. All of the first interviews are there. So if you go to the second episode, that is as recorded. And trying to decide how much I want to be a control freak and re-edit some of those things, because I didn't know anything about podcasting or podcast production, because I do it all. I don't send this off to a producer to take care of.
And I appreciate that. And that's why I wanted to see, because if you go back to my first show, it was in studio at that time. And I just funked it and whatever. And I have to say, I've grown. I think I've got 150 episodes. And I think, like Stella, I've finally gotten my groove back. So I have my routine, I have it set up, what I want to do with the show, but it takes a while to find your groove. And the fact that you edit, more power to you. This, if I screw up or say something wrong, it's there for perpetuity. It doesn't get edited, it goes into video. And there have been moments I just wanted to go hide my head, but it's like Saturday Night Live. It is what it is. Let's talk about, Chefs Without Restaurants. You've had some fabulous guests on there, people that my audience would recognize. And then you've had, other people on who might be food truck people, who might be a farmer, who, is just doesn't have that restaurant. Fill us in a little bit more.
Yeah. So I built a community first called Chefs Without Restaurants. When you have a successful or a semi-successful business, everyone wants to know how you do it, right? Let me buy you coffee. Let me buy you a beer. We'll sit down. Tell me how I can start a personal chef business like you. And I did that a couple of times. Said that, this isn't a great use of my time, though I love talking with people. Let's build a community. We can put it online. And the idea was having a Facebook group, really, where you could come and ask a question. What's the best way to acquire customers if you have a personal chef business? Or where do you start if you want to start a food truck? And also gig sharing, because what I was finding is it's really hard to acquire customers. And I would be booked for, say, a Friday night, and then someone else would reach out to me and want a dinner. And I'm booked. So it's a hot lead. And I would love to pass that along to someone else in the industry. So I wanted to have a place where people could share not only best practices, but also maybe get some work out of it. And I thought it would be like 8 people that I knew here in the DMV area. And I posted about it on my private Facebook page, but I'm friends with someone, Laura Hayes, who used to write for the DC City paper. And literally the day I posted on my Facebook, she said, "Oh, can I call you today or tomorrow? Because I want to put this in the city paper this weekend," which was crazy because I thought, again, it was going to be like 8 people. And I talked to her, the thing ran in the paper, and I had like almost 200 people follow the Facebook group that weekend, and all these people who wanted to be part of a group. And that was astounding because I thought it was going to be a handful of people, and it grew. And it was still 2 years in, and I had someone who was part of the community. He worked in Frederick having a food truck, Andrew of Pizza Llama, and he was helping me on a gig. And he said, "Why isn't this a podcast?" And people have heard me say, because, my response was, I don't know how to podcast. So he actually started the show with me. And in November 2019, we started the podcast, and he had to leave March 2020 when COVID hit. We were doing it all in person. We were doing it at a local brewery, Jug Bridge Brewery, which is no longer here. But I was like, okay, well, you're going to leave. I'm going to keep this show going. And then just took the podcast virtual, which opened up so many doors because now I'm talking to people all over the world. But one of the things is I wanted to have it be tactical, meaning I'm going to talk to you, or I'm going to talk to guests about how to acquire customers, how to do your marketing, how to start a food truck. But I also wanted people to come on and share their stories. Carla Hall came on the show. I think everyone knows her. She's had a great career, and just talk about some of her things, like why she wanted to quit her catering company, why it was important for her to focus on food media and not be cooking products for people. She's not necessarily going to teach you how to do anything, but she's going to share a story that I think is interesting.
Carla's a very giving person, part of the Women Chef and Restaurateurs group. And, there's a whole lap over between women chefs in Washington. They had the group get together. Since Women Chef and Restaurateurs officially closed down, but I keep the Facebook going because there's 5,000 women chef on that web page. And we got together in DC, a number of personal chefs that were there. And I thought, well, I came in from Baltimore, I came the furthest, but no. A woman has a bakery in St. Michael's, drove all the way into Vienna, Virginia, just to have this little get together. So, people condemn Facebook for many, many reasons. I think it's opened up the doors to many people and offered great opportunities. So your glass is half full or your glass is half empty. Mine has been full. 5 tips for success to becoming a personal chef. I saw you posted that. You want to cover a couple bullet points?
Yeah, I think, one of the things is, for me, networking is huge in everything. And that has been great. So whether that has been, I think one of the biggest challenges is getting new customers, right? So whether that's you've got a network of personal chefs where you can share job opportunities, like I already talked about, but also I have had a lot of success with working with Airbnb operators, so much so that I would say like 80+% of my business is coming from them. So, find out the Airbnbs that are operating in your area. Can you build a media kit and put that together and send it to them and say, hey, I think this would be great for your guests, especially if it's in a remote area, which is why I've targeted places like Harper's Ferry or, maybe Gettysburg. Not that they don't have good restaurants, but I think a lot of times people want to go there to kind of get away. And then they don't know where they're going to eat. And they're maybe just doing takeout pizza. So reaching out to these people and saying, hey, I think this would be great to kind of partner. And I'm huge in social media. So that means, if I go to their place and cook dinner, I'm shooting video and photos, as I always do, as possible. And when I share on Instagram, making sure I tag them and then they share that, right? Like, isn't that the best way to help each other kind of grow? And I would say that's the number one tip, is like find a network of people, whether it's people within your peer group or just kind of affiliated businesses. I have a local oil and vinegar shop, and making sure that I tag them when I create recipes using their product. But it also means like doing cooking demos in their shop for their guests, who then hopefully will hire me to be a personal chef.
Yeah, Chris, I can talk to you forever. I still have a list of questions. And I want to bring up that your daughter has become the photographer in the family.
A little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah. So, she's someone who I think is artistic but also has the patience and skill. So, I'm sure you're alluding to, if you saw on my social media the past week or so, I did a photo and video shoot and I needed a set of hands. I am someone who always wants to do as much as possible, maybe to a fault, right? And a couple of years ago, I hired a company to do some photos and video for me. And it was okay, but I felt like it wasn't anything I couldn't do. It was just that there were two of them and they could film me when I couldn't film myself. So after that, I bought some studio lights and, kind of upgraded some of my gear and started doing a lot of that stuff myself. So maybe like a year and a half ago, when I wanted to do like a new professional headshot, I enlisted my daughter. I did the light setup and got it set for her, but gave her my camera and said, just start taking photos. So my like professional headshot she took, she just turned 11 this past Saturday. So last week I was at an Airbnb. There's a place called the Fingerboard Farm in Iamsville, Maryland. I cook a lot of dinners there. Dawn, the owner's become a friend. And I said, you have a beautiful kitchen, great studio, or great natural light. Can I come? I want to shoot some more photos and video for my business. And she said, sure, please. And, again, relationships, because I'm going to be tagging the business in all of my work. But I asked my daughter if she wanted to come along and I paid her $50. I can't imagine being 11 years old and getting $50 to her. That's like a fortune. I probably should have paid her like $200+, but don't tell her that. But yeah, like just teaching her some basic stuff. And I think it's a skill she could really, continue to do. So showing her all the apps that I use and how to adjust the light within there, and then having her help me with a little post-production stuff. has been really nice. And she's expressed interest in coming along and even helping maybe serve dinners when we do them. She did all the dishes while we were there, which was great, and was even a little sous chef as it happened. She has a twin brother who has zero interest in helping me with any of this stuff, though, by the way.
Well, he'll probably emulate your wife. They sort of go different routes, and I think that's great. Has there been a guest that you got to come on your podcast that you spent days upon days getting the information? Was there one guest who had you shaking in your boots?
I think Carla was probably the most nerve-wracking because she was the biggest guest. Like, she was the one that I really wanted to land, and making sure that it went well, because I don't know if you've had this experience, but a lot of times people are interested in coming on the show and then it just doesn't happen, right? Like, whether you reach out or something and you go back and forth, and it's quite often some of the bigger names, and then for whatever reason, it just doesn't happen. So I was like, I really want to make sure this happens. I'm going to go out of my way, because again, she's someone who I think could bring some crossover listeners to my show if it's promoted right. And what I talk about on my show, I've talked about a number of times, is if you land a big guest, that doesn't necessarily mean big numbers, because they're not always invested in you or your community or sharing, right? I had a guest a couple of weeks ago who is really well known on YouTube. He has 10 million followers, 11 million on TikTok, I think. But he didn't really care about me or the community, and he didn't share it. And his episode has much fewer listens than someone like weeks after who has like 2,000 followers, right? Because we had a great conversation, and I don't regret doing that, but he wasn't part of the community. Carla is someone who, whether it's her or someone who does her social media, has followed Chefs Without Restaurants and Perfect Little Bites for a while. And we had a good rapport, and we had a great conversation, and she was generous enough to share the episode. And when I tagged her as a collaborator on Instagram, she accepted it. And that was great. So I think the prep for her episode was the one I probably did the most, or wanted to make sure I nailed it.
Right. There have been many people and friends and connections that have come on, and I ask if they would be kind enough to share. You can't make it a requirement. And I can have it where they just don't bother. And yet Sarah Moulton was on, she shared it everywhere.
But why come on the show? That's what I don't understand. Again, if, going back to this guest, you have 20 million followers on social media. You don't need me, right? Like, why are you doing the show if you don't want to share it? Because I've got, let's say 5,000 listeners. Like, that's a drop in the bucket when you have 20 million followers. So why even, they reached out to me. It wasn't me reaching out to them. It would be different if I reached out to them. It was like, they were doing me a favor. And that's what I have trouble with sometimes, is like not understanding why these people even want to come on a show like mine or yours and then not bother sharing it. I don't know.
Well, for whatever reason, but, I remember the ones that do, and the other ones, I hope I push things out all through my social media, like you. I tag everyone who's involved, and I hope that they're kind enough to share, because it helps it grow. It helps the networking, which we both agree is crucial in any business. Anything that you do, it is who you know. Don't let anybody tell you anything else. It is who you know. I can keep talking, but I want to ask this question. Maybe not. Okay. I'm going to do that. There's a couple here. Did you watch The Bear?
I have 2 episodes left of season 2. I got a little behind because of vacations and stuff. So just like, no spoilers. I enjoyed season 1. I'm enjoying season 2. I'm almost done. I might finish it tonight.
Okay. Have you done the Christmas dinner episode?
I have. Well, we're halfway through that. So last night got about halfway through that episode. It gave me anxiety just watching it. And my wife too. We're like, it's kind of like the epitome of many Christmas dinners people have had, although I've never had a Christmas dinner personally in my family that was that crazy.
Right. Great guest stars. I thought that the acting there was so fabulous. Everybody acting over everybody, and the guest stars that they had there. So, people, if you haven't seen The Bear, find it. It's on
Hulu,
uh, Hulu.
FX via Hulu, I think.
Yes. It is worth paying for 1 month to stream it and then just cancel it. Put on your calendar to cancel. I'm going to come down to a number of the questions. I do want to ask you one more that's not listed. If you could stagiaire in any one restaurant around the world, what would it be?
It's a tough one because I've kind of gone over that in my head a few times. I really love Alex Stupak in New York. I love Mexican food. Empeyon, his restaurants have been some of my favorites. He just opened a new restaurant. I'm kind of intimidated by him and scared. But he's worked for guys like Wiley Dufresne. He's worked, with some of the best chefs in the country. So I think both learning Mexican cooking, but also high-end food and his approach to it, and some of the way he looks at things, I think would be really interesting.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go down to my typical questions at the end of the show. What's the best bite you've had all week?
So I would say this weekend was my kid's birthday, and I had nothing to do with this. It was all my wife and my daughter, but my daughter's really into anime, and she got a cookbook called Cook Anime, and she wanted to make a Battenberg cake, which is like one of those checkerboard cakes. So they did a strawberry and a vanilla cake checkerboard, and then it's coated in ganache and marzipan, which was delicious. So that's probably the best thing I had all week. I was really impressed with how it came out.
If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
To not be afraid to take risks. And I would say it's about the learning and the journey and not the result. And whether we're speaking about school, I went to culinary school, and I think at the time one of the big things was making sure I did well grade wise. But I think that restricted me, and I took less risks. And I always talk about the fact that I'm still to this day not as good at butchering fish as I could have been, because when you're in a class and you can kind of choose what you want to do, it's like, well, I know how to break down a chicken, so I'm going to do that so I can get the A, instead of like hack this fish to death and get a D. But in the long run, like, what did that get me? And in the 20 plus years since I graduated, nobody's ever asked to see a transcript of how I did in culinary school. So just making sure that you learn as much as you can and fail a lot, right? Isn't that the best way to learn? Is like,
Right.
I'm more likely to remember the failures and then how I overcame them.
Okay, so that brings me to the next question. What was your ultimate culinary fail?
Man, there's so many. I don't even know where I would start. The one that I always remember was being fresh out of culinary school. I wanted to make a dinner for my parents. I don't even know if I was thinking it was fancy, but I remember seeing somewhere about a Guinness stew, the idea that you had Guinness in a beef stew. And I don't even think I had a recipe. And we're talking like early days of the internet, so it wasn't that easy. So I winged it, and I cooked all of the beef in Guinness. I don't even think I added stock. There was like no beef stock or chicken stock. And I ate it, and the meat was so bitter. It was inedible. And I just remember I paid to take my parents out to dinner, and my mom, who is fantastic, would have muddled through it. And I'm like, no, this is just like not edible. But, I thought I knew everything at 22, and,
Right. If you could wake up tomorrow morning with a new talent, what would it be?
I think if it could be like being really great at photography, that's what I would want to do. It's something that has been a hobby of mine. I still spend a lot of time trying to learn, but I just wish I was better. Every time I see photos that people post or video, yeah, and that's something that I could just put in more hours, and I do as much as I can. But if I could wake up and easily make it happen, I would love that.
And I want to tell people that, go to his reels. He's got a great sense of humor. I was watching a couple of them. They're really funny. And last question, what didn't I ask you that I probably should have?
Oh, geez. I don't know how I managed to match these pink headphones to my pink shirt. I don't know. I'd say maybe how to what I'd say is like how to start a small food business, because I think a lot of people out there are maybe interested in that. And I say if you can start any business, if you're interested in having a business, can you start it on the side? You know, I did something where I was able to maintain a full-time job with kind of like a security blanket. And, you know, I just started doing it, you know, one party a month, two parties a month. And whether that's being, you know, a photographer practicing on the side, seeing if you can pick up contract work. If there's something that you love and you're thinking about doing it as a career or at least a side hustle, just start doing it.
Great. I'm telling you, I could continue reading and going over the notes and talking with you. And I have to end it here. Maybe we'll do another show.
Sure.
Whenever.
I would love that. I've enjoyed talking to you as always.
Great, great. Thank you so much, everybody. This is Chris Spear, his private chef or personal chef, Perfect Little Bites, podcast, Chefs Without Restaurants. Just spell out the name. You can find it on every platform of social media. Do tune in. You don't want to miss out. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks again.
Okay, everyone. We've always come to the end of the show and my food tidbit of the week. And I want to thank Suzanne Loudermilk here in Baltimore who turned me on to this book because I love murder and I love food. So here it is. It's called Mastering the Art of French Murder. And if it looks like Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking, they have made Julia a character within this book and murder. And it's by Colleen Cambridge. And if you like a murder mystery and you like Julia Child and cooking, this is your summer read. It's really light and airy and fun. So that's my tidbit for the week. Next week's guest from the heart of the Mississippi Delta comes Martha Foose. She's a gifted chef and storyteller. Martha invites you into her kitchen to share recipes that bring alive landscape, people, and traditions that make Southern cuisine an American favorite. She's the author of Screen Doors and Sweet Tea, a James Beard Award-winning cookbook, a Southerly Course Recipes and Stories from Close to Home, and just a little nugget here, she was also the food stylist for the movie The Help. Also monthly, J Moore is giving away $50 gift cards to some of your favorite local restaurants. Visit jmoreliving.com/contest to enter to win. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at my email, which is food@jmoreliving.com, or Instagram @Dara Cooks. All shows are immediately archived in video form on J Moore Living's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com's website. Feel free to dig into our video archives of past shows. We truly appreciate it when you share our show with friends and family. May your plates always, always remain full. And as always, thank you for joining us, and I will see you next Thursday.